His breath was hot against my neck as he pressed me into the corner of the darkened escape room. The timer on the wall cast an eerie red glow, but all I could focus on was the solid weight of his body pinning me there, his hands braced on either side of my head. "Found you," he whispered, his voice rough with something that had nothing to do with our game. My pulse hammered as his fingers traced down my arm, slow and deliberate. I should have pushed him away, should have reminded him we were here with friends, but when his lips brushed against my collarbone, all rational thoughts scattered. The lock clicked behind us, sealing us in this forgotten corner while our teammates searched elsewhere, and suddenly I realized we weren't just playing a game anymore. Quick favor before we dive deeper. If you're enjoying this, hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The escape room had seemed like such an innocent idea when my friend suggested it. "Come on, Tessa," Mia had insisted. "You need to get out more. Stop hiding behind your textbooks." I'd reluctantly agreed, thinking an hour of puzzles and riddles would be harmless enough. What I hadn't counted on was him, Reese, dark-haired and confident, with eyes that seemed to see right through me from the moment we were introduced at the front desk. Our group of 6 had been split randomly by the staff, and somehow I'd ended up paired with him for the medieval castle theme room. The others, Mia, Jake, Sarah, and her boyfriend Connor, were assigned to the adjacent space, connected by a series of hidden passages we'd need to discover to complete the challenge together. Lights dimmed as our hour began, plunging us into an atmosphere thick with mystery and anticipation. Fake torches flickered against stone walls, casting dancing shadows that made everything feel surreal. The game master's voice echoed through hidden speakers, explaining our quest to rescue a captured princess before time ran out. Reese moved with surprising grace in the dim light, his fingers trailing over carved symbols on the walls, testing hidden switches with practiced ease. "You've done this before," I observed, trying to keep my voice steady as I watched him work. He glanced over his shoulder, that knowing smile playing at his lips. "A few times, but never with someone like you." The way he said it made heat curl, low in my stomach. I told myself it was just the adrenaline of the game, the excitement of the challenge. But when he moved closer to examine a puzzle near where I stood, his shoulder brushing against mine, I knew it was something else entirely. "This mechanism needs 2 people, he said, his voice lower now, more intimate in the darkness. "Put your hand here." He guided my fingers to a carved lever, his touch lingering longer than necessary. The warmth of his skin against mine sent electricity shooting up my arm. We worked together, our bodies moving in sync as we manipulated the ancient-looking contraption. When the hidden door finally groaned open, revealing a narrow passageway, he turned to me with triumph blazing in his eyes. "Nice work, partner." The passageway was barely wide enough for one person, forcing us to move single file through the winding corridor. I went first, hyper-aware of his presence behind me, of how his breath stirred my hair when he leaned close to whisper directions. The walls seemed to press in around us, creating an intimacy that made my skin tingle with anticipation. "Dead end," I whispered when we reached what appeared to be a solid wall. But Reese pressed past me in the narrow space, his body sliding against mine as he examined the surface. For a moment we were chest to chest, breathing the same air, and I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes even in the dim light. "Not dead," he murmured, his lips so close to mine I could feel the words. "Hidden." His hands moved over the wall behind me, and I felt the secret panel give way, creating an alcove just large enough for 2 people to hide. That's when we heard them, our friends' voices echoing from somewhere nearby, getting closer. Without thinking, Reese pulled me into the hidden space with him, his arm circling my waist as the panel slid shut behind us. We were trapped in darkness so complete I couldn't see my own hand, pressed together in a space so small that every breath brought us closer. "They'll find the passage soon," he whispered against my ear, but he made no move to leave our hiding spot. Instead, his fingers found the curve of my hip, tracing gentle circles through the fabric of my dress. "We should wait here until they pass." My breath caught as his other hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing across my cheek with infinite tenderness. "Tessa," he said my name like a prayer, and I felt something inside me crack open, spilling heat and longing into the darkness. "Between us." "We shouldn't," I whispered, even as my body betrayed me, leaning into his touch. The others are looking for clues," he said, his lips finding the sensitive spot just below my ear. "Not for us." His mouth trailed lower, pressing soft kisses along my neck that made me gasp. And even if they were, they'd never find this place. His hands grew bolder, skimming down my sides, mapping the curves of my body with reverent fingers. When he found the hem of my dress, I thought I might dissolve entirely. "Tell me to stop," he breathed against my throat, "and I will." but I couldn't form the words. Instead, I let my head fall back against the wall, giving him better access to the column of my neck. He accepted the invitation eagerly, his mouth working magic against my skin while his hands explored with increasing confidence. "You're so warm," he murmured, his voice thick with desire. "So perfect." His fingers slipped beneath the fabric of my dress, tracing patterns on my bare skin that made me tremble. Every touch sent shockwaves through my nervous system, awakening needs I'd tried so hard to ignore. The darkness made everything more intense, more immediate. Without sight, every sensation was amplified. The warmth of his breath on my skin, the solid strength of his body pressed against mine, the gentle scrape of his stubble as he kissed his way across my collarbone. I found myself clinging to him, my fingers twisted in his shirt, anchoring myself to the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly shifted beneath my feet. "I've been thinking about this all evening," he confessed, his hands growing more adventurous. "From the moment I saw you, I knew I had to have you." His words sent liquid fire racing through my veins, pooling low in my core where a steady ache had begun to build. When his mouth found mine, I was lost. The kiss was everything I'd imagined and more, demanding yet tender, passionate yet controlled. He kissed me like he had all the time in the world, like nothing existed beyond this hidden alcove and the magic we were creating together. I kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring all my pent-up longing into the connection between us. His hands continued their exploration, finding the zipper at the back of my dress and slowly, teasingly, drawing it down. The cool air hit my heated skin, making me gasp against his lips. "So beautiful," he whispered, his fingers tracing the newly exposed expanse of my back. "I want to worship every inch of you." The fabric of my dress pooled around my waist, leaving me vulnerable and exposed in the darkness. But instead of feeling self-conscious, I felt powerful, desired, alive in a way I'd never experienced before. His hands mapped my curves with reverent touches, each caress sending ripples of pleasure through my sensitized nerves. "Your skin is like silk," he breathed, his mouth following the path his hands had traced. "So soft, so perfect." His lips found the swell of my chest, pressing kisses that made me arch against him, seeking more contact, more pressure, more of everything he was offering. I could hear my friends' voices growing fainter as they moved, deeper into the maze of passages, giving us the privacy we needed for this moment of stolen intimacy. Reese seemed to sense my growing urgency, his touches becoming more purposeful, more focused on the places that made me gasp and shiver in his arms. "Let me take care of you," he whispered, his hands sliding lower, finding the sensitive skin of my inner thighs. "Let me show you how good this can be." His fingers were gentle but insistent, coaxing responses from my body that I'd never known were possible. The pleasure built slowly, layer upon layer of sensation that had me writhing against him, desperate for more. He was patient, methodical, learning what made me sigh and what made me moan, adjusting his touch accordingly. It was like he was solving the most complex puzzle of all, the mystery of my desire. "Please," I finally managed to whisper, though I wasn't sure what I was asking. "Far!" He seemed to understand anyway, his touch becoming more insistent, more focused, until I felt myself approaching some invisible edge I'd never known existed. "That's it," he encouraged, his voice rough with his own need. "Let go for me, beautiful. Let me feel you fall apart." His words were my undoing, sending me spiraling over the edge into a cascade of sensation that left me shaking in his arms. He held me close as the waves subsided, pressing gentle kisses to my temple while I caught my breath. "Incredible," he murmured against my hair. "You're absolutely incredible." But even as the afterglow warmed my skin, reality began to creep back in. What had we just done? How could I face my friends knowing what had happened in this hidden corner of the escape room? The questions multiplied in my mind, each one bringing fresh waves of anxiety. "Hey," Reese said softly, seeming to sense my growing distress. "Look at me." His hands framed my face in the darkness, his thumbs stroking across my cheeks with infinite gentleness. "Don't overthink this. What just happened between us was beautiful, natural. Don't let anyone make you feel ashamed of that." Before I could respond, we heard the distinctive sound of a lock clicking somewhere nearby, followed by excited voices. Our friends had found another passage, another piece of the puzzle. Reality came crashing back, bringing with it the weight of what we'd just done. "We need to get back to the game," I whispered, my hands already moving to straighten my dress, to put myself back together. But Reese caught my wrists, stilling my frantic movements. "This doesn't end here," he said, his voice intense with conviction. "What we have, what we just shared, it's bigger than this room, bigger than this game. Don't pretend it isn't." "I can't," I said, panic rising in my throat. "My friends, they can't know. They can't ever know what happened here. The thought of facing Mia's knowing looks, of enduring Jake's crude jokes, made my stomach twist with dread. Then we'll be careful, he said simply. But I'm not walking away from this. From you. Not when I've finally found something real. His conviction was both thrilling and terrifying. How could he be so sure when I felt like I was drowning in uncertainty? He helped me adjust my dress, his touch gentle but proprietary, like he was already claiming ownership of my body. The thought should have annoyed me, but instead, it sent another thrill of desire racing through my veins. What was wrong with me? How could I want him this much after knowing him for barely an hour? There's another passage here, he said, finding a hidden switch I'd missed in my distraction. The wall slid away, revealing a corridor that led back toward the main chamber. We'll go back separately. I'll wait here for a few minutes, then follow. I nodded, not trusting my voice. But as I stepped toward the opening, he caught my hand, pulling me back for one more kiss. This one was different, possessive, claiming, full of promises and threats in equal measure. This isn't over, he said against my lips. Not by a long shot. I fled through the passage, my heart hammering against my ribs. The main chamber felt blazingly bright after the intimate darkness of our hiding place, and I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust. My friends were clustered around a series of symbolic locks, their voices animated with the excitement of the hunt. Tessa, Mia called out when she spotted me. Where have you been? We've been looking everywhere for you and that guy. Her eyes scanned my appearance, and I prayed the dim lighting would hide any evidence of what had just transpired. Got separated, I managed, amazed at how normal my voice sounded. Found a passage that led to a dead end. Where's everyone else? Sarah and Connor are in the dungeon section, Jake said without looking up from the lock he was examining. This thing needs 6 different symbols to open. We've only found 4 so far. I threw myself into the puzzle with desperate enthusiasm, anything to keep from thinking about what had happened in that hidden alcove. But my hands shook as I examined the carved symbols, and I kept glancing toward the passage where I'd left Reese, waiting for him to emerge. When he finally appeared, sliding smoothly back into the group like he'd never been gone, I felt my pulse spike again. He looked completely composed, unruffled, like nothing monumental had just occurred between us. Only I caught the heated glance he sent my way, the slight smile that curved his lips when our eyes met. Any luck? He asked casually, moving to examine a section of wall near where I stood. His proximity made my skin tingle with renewed awareness, memories of his hands on my body flooding back with embarrassing intensity. 2 more symbols to go, Connor called from across the room. This medieval stuff is harder than it looks. Reese moved closer, ostensibly to get a better look at the symbol I was examining, but I felt his fingers brush against mine as he pointed to a carved detail. The contact sent electricity shooting up my arm, and I had to bite my lip to keep from gasping. This one here, he said, his voice perfectly normal despite the fire I could see burning in his eyes. See how it's different from the others? Slightly raised? His finger traced the carving, and I found myself mesmerized by the movement, remembering how those same fingers had mapped my skin in the darkness. The rest of the game passed in a blur of stolen glances and carefully orchestrated moments of contact. Every time Reese moved near me, my body responded as if he'd thrown a switch, flooding me with heat and longing. He seemed to know exactly the effect he was having, his touches becoming bolder as the evening progressed. When we finally solved the last puzzle and rescued the princess with minutes to spare, our group erupted in celebration. High fives were exchanged, photos were taken, and plans were made to hit a nearby bar to continue the evening. Through it all, I felt Reese's eyes on me, patient and predatory, waiting for his moment. I should probably head home, I said as we gathered our things. Early class tomorrow. It was a lie, but I needed space to process what had happened, to figure out what I was going to do about the man who'd awakened something wild and reckless inside me. Come on, Tess, Mia wheedled. 1 drink, you never come out with us anymore. Her pleading eyes made guilt twist in my stomach, but the thought of sitting across from Reese in a crowded bar, pretending nothing had changed, was more than I could handle. Rain check, I said, already backing toward the exit. I promise I'll make it up to you guys. I almost made it to the parking lot before he caught up with me. Running away? Reese's voice stopped me in my tracks, sending familiar shivers down my spine. I turned slowly, finding him leaning against the side of the building with that same confident smile that had undone me in the escape room. I'm not running, I said, though we both knew it was a lie. Then have dinner with me tomorrow, he said, pushing off the wall and moving closer. Just us, no games, no hiding in dark corners. Let me take you somewhere nice, show you how this could work between us. I don't think that's a good idea, I said, even as my treacherous body swayed toward him. What happened in there? It was just the heat of the moment, the adrenaline. Bullshit, he said softly, but with such conviction that I felt my protests die in my throat. You felt what I felt. This connection between us, it's real, Tessa. Don't try to convince yourself otherwise. He reached out, his fingers ghosting along my arm in a touch so light I might have imagined it. But my body's response was very real, heat blooming under his touch like he was lighting fires beneath my skin. I saw how you responded to me, he continued, his voice dropping to that intimate register that made my knees weak. The way you came apart in my arms, the sounds you made when I touched you, that wasn't pretend, sweetheart. That was as real as it gets. My face flamed at his words, at the vivid memories they conjured. You can't just say things like that, I whispered, glancing around to make sure no one could overhear. Why not? It's the truth. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his body. I want you, Tessa. I want to take you to bed and spend hours learning every inch of your body. I want to make you come apart the way you did tonight, over and over until you can't remember your own name. His words sent liquid heat pooling between my thighs, and I had to grip the handle of my car door to keep from swaying into him. Stop, I breathed, though my body was screaming for more. Give me your number, he said instead, pulling out his phone. Let me prove to you that this is worth exploring. I should have said no, should have gotten in my car and driven away and never looked back. But something about the intensity in his eyes, the certainty in his voice, made me hesitate. What if he was right? What if what had happened between us was more than just a moment of madness? One dinner, I heard myself saying, as if from a great distance. That's all. His smile was triumphant as he handed me his phone to enter my number. One dinner, he agreed, though something in his expression suggested he was planning much more than that. After I'd programmed my contact information and handed his phone back, he leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to my cheek. The innocent gesture shouldn't have affected me so strongly, but I found myself gripping the car door harder, fighting the urge to turn my head and capture his lips with mine. I'll call you tomorrow, he promised, his breath warm against my ear. And Tessa, don't try to convince yourself this was a mistake. Some things are too perfect to be anything but destiny. I managed to get into my car and drive home without wrapping myself around a telephone pole, though it was a near thing. Every traffic light gave me time to remember his hands on my skin, his voice in my ear, the way he'd made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. My apartment felt strange and empty after the intensity of the evening. I poured myself a glass of wine and tried to study, but my textbooks might as well have been written in ancient Greek for all the sense they made. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that hidden alcove, lost in sensation and surrender. My phone buzzed with a text from Mia. Where did you disappear to? And what was up with the hot guy? He kept asking about you after you left. I stared at the message for long minutes, trying to formulate a response that wouldn't give anything away. Finally, I typed back, just tired, and I barely talked to him. Night. Then I turned off my phone before she could respond, but sleep was impossible. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of what had happened. The rational part of my mind insisted it was just physical attraction, just the novelty of being desired by someone so confident and experienced. But deeper down, in places I usually kept locked away, I knew it was more than that. The way he'd looked at me, touched me, spoke to me, it was like he'd seen something in me that I'd never recognized myself. For those moments in the darkness, I'd felt beautiful, powerful, desirable in a way that had nothing to do with anyone else's opinion and everything to do with my own awakening sense of self. The next morning brought fresh doubts and recriminations. In the harsh light of day, what had happened seemed reckless, dangerous, completely unlike the careful, controlled person I'd always been. I was a graduate student, for God's sake, working on my thesis in behavioral psychology. I didn't have random encounters with strangers in escape rooms, but even as I tried to convince myself it had been a temporary lapse in judgment, my body remembered his touch, craved more of the pleasure he'd shown me was possible. I found myself checking my reflection more carefully than usual, wondering what he'd seen in me that had sparked such intense desire. My phone rang just after lunch, and I nearly dropped it when I saw the unfamiliar number. I let it ring twice more before answering, my voice carefully neutral. Hello? Hello, beautiful. His voice sent familiar shivers down my spine, and I sank into my desk chair, suddenly weak-kneed. How did you sleep? Fine, I lied, gripping the phone tighter. Listen, about last night, I can't stop thinking about you, he interrupted, his voice warm with remembered desire. About how you felt in my arms, how you tasted, the little sounds you made when I touched you just right. Heat flooded my cheeks, and I glanced around my empty apartment as if someone might overhear. You can't say things like that. Why not? It's true. I could hear the smile in his voice. I've been hard all morning just thinking about you, wondering what you're wearing, what you're doing, whether you're thinking about me too. My breath caught at his frank admission, arousal pooling low in my belly despite my attempts to remain rational. Reese, tell me you haven't been thinking about it, he challenged softly. Tell me you haven't been remembering how good it felt when I made you come apart in my arms. I couldn't, because I had been thinking about it, reliving every second, wanting more despite all the reasons I should run in the opposite direction. Where do you want me to take you to dinner? He asked when my silence stretched on. Somewhere public where you'll feel safe, or somewhere intimate where we can talk without interruption. The question forced me to acknowledge that I was going to see him again, that despite all my reservations, I wanted to explore this connection between us. Somewhere public, I said finally. At least at first. At first, he repeated with obvious satisfaction. I like the sound of that. It implies there might be an after. We arranged to meet at a restaurant downtown, somewhere upscale enough to feel special, but public enough to keep us from doing anything too reckless. At least, that was my theory. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something that would change everything about the careful, orderly life I'd built for myself. The rest of the day crawled by with agonizing slowness. I changed clothes 3 times, settling finally on a dress that was elegant but not too revealing, professional but still feminine. I told myself I was dressing for confidence, not for him, but the lie felt thin, even to me. As I drove to the restaurant, my hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel, I wondered if this was how people felt before they jumped out of airplanes, or off bridges, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure, knowing they were about to do something that would either be the best decision of their lives or their biggest mistake. Only one way to find out. So here I am, about to walk into something that could change everything. If you were in my shoes, would you take the leap or play it safe? And what do you think is going through his mind right now? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one and I'm dying to know what you'd do. Don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe for more stories that'll keep you up at night. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.